I'm Van Sebastian, here with my co-host S.A. Bascalans for this week's Reading on the Edge Season 10, Episode 27 interview. We'll be talking with Bill Hulseman and discussing his book, Six to Carry the Casket and One to Say the Mass. So let's get to know our guest. Bill Hulseman is a writer, ritual designer, and former educator whose work explores identity, belonging, and personal agency. His debut book, Six to Carry the Casket and One to Say the Mass, is a collection of deeply personal essays examining the identities we inherit, the traditions we navigate, and the power we have to shape our own narratives. Through reflections on family, Catholicism, and queer identity, Hulseman offers a nuanced exploration of what it means to carve out a space for oneself in a world that often seeks to define us. A former middle school principal, teacher, and campus minister, Hulseman holds degrees in religious studies, the comparative study of religion, and education leadership. His time in Catholic schools gave him both a profound appreciation for faith and a first-hand understanding of the tensions between personal identity and institutional tradition. His writing is informed by his background, as well as his deep love for pop culture, where figures like Madonna and the Golden Girls helped him see himself long before the world was ready to. He now lives in Seattle with his husband, Jonathan, where he continues to write, design rituals, and lead meaningful conversations about identity, faith, and belonging. Bill, that is one heck of a bio. Welcome to the show.
That's a very generous intro. Thank you.
So, in all of that, because obviously you work with educating people and just uncovering identity, where did the passion to write come from? Because it's kind of a lonely craft. Like all of a sudden, people get set aside and you're trapped
Mhm.
in words.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've always been writing. I think, I've been an introvert since the day I was born, and I think writing has always been a tool for me to channel, questions or angst or insecurities. But also when I got into, high school and college and grad school, reflection was a tool for me to keep my head above water and to not, it wasn't just a creative exercise. It was how I made meaning out of my experiences and how I made meaning for my life. And so writing was, was the easiest way to get into that. Yeah.
Did you use it as a reflection or as more of a categorization of thoughts?
No reflection. I like to, I've been introduced to a lot of different methods of reflection over time, and so I've been able to tap into a lot of different kind of streams, a lot of different approaches to reflecting. But the question is always, who am I? Where am I going? Who am I? Where am I? Who are the people around me? What do I need? What do they need? What does the world need? That's you can write and you can process, but it's for me, it's always looking to build some meaning out of those experiences.
Well, let me give you one more question for a future book. My question that sparked my whole coming out was, why am I different?
Mm,
So let's talk about your book, though. Six to Carry the Casket and One to Say the Mass.
yeah,
That title has meaning.
it sure does. It sure does. You want to hear the story?
I would love to. So your novel, Six to Carry the Cat, well, not novel, your collection of essays, Six to Carry the Casket, One to Say the Mass. That title is packed with meaning. What's the story behind it?
Yeah, it's a reference to my mom, and it's also a reference to like one of my first identities, one of the first identities that was given to me. So my mom had a way with words, and for her 80th birthday, I was nominated by my sisters to give a toast, and instead of telling stories or reciting accomplishments or anything like that. I shared her greatest hits, the phrases that stood out over time that she would repeat. Semantics is the problem with the world today, she would say all the time. Um, but I'm from the youngest of a big family. I'm the youngest of 10, and I'm one of seven brothers and three sisters. And when people, my mom would say she has 10 children, and people are like, "You have 10 children?" And she'd lean in and say, "Well, they're from my husband's first marriage." She was her husband's first marriage. So she wasn't lying, but it was enough of a deflection to like stop talking about how many children I have, new conversation.
Right.
Uh, but people would balk at seven boys. How do you seven boys? And
Well,
she'd
you
say,
were casting for Seven Brides for Seven Brothers.
exactly. Maybe that was their goal all along. Who
Yeah,
knows?
yeah.
Yeah. But she would say, well, God gave me seven sons for a reason, six to carry the casket and one to say the mass. And that was
Oh,
that was her way of saying, she wanted a priest in the family. And so with the first six were definitely not on their road to seminary. And so when I came along, I think I was the last hope. So I would hear that when I went to college and I declared a religious studies major, and then I went to divinity school. I think my mom was seeing like a prophecy come to fruition. Uh, but yeah, it was one of my first identities that she handed me. That I've always had fun with that joke too. And it's a nice reference to her wit, the
Hmm.
economy of words that she was able to get a whole lot across. Um, and it echoes a lot in my family. We love telling stories. There are a lot of phrases that are pithy and we like to repeat, and it's a way to kind of preserve that family tradition, family cultural legacy of good storytelling. But yeah,
Love that.
I'm the one who's supposed to say the mass while the others carry the casket. But I
Awesome.
helped her plan the mass. I helped her plan the funeral. I didn't get to actually say it because obviously I'm not a priest. Yeah.
Right. So if I were to see this book at like a pride parade or an event and it's on a table in front of you and I were to walk up and say, "What's it about?" What would your elevator pitch be? And I
Hmm.
know we gave a lot of it away in the bio.
Well, it's a collection of essays, and it's not necessarily a memoir. It's not a manifesto. It's a collection of essays that really grew out of grief. Um, when I started my work as a middle school principal, it was a job that I was 2 decades working for. This is what I wanted to be a school leader. I was passionate about education. I was passionate about building school communities, and I was working and working, working for this. And I got this job as a middle school principal, and I uprooted and moved to the West Coast. And 2 days before the first day of school, my mom died. And I'm smiling about that. It's not because it was a very funny experience, but she always had a really good way of setting our priorities, of reminding us what was important. And so here I'm thinking I'm going to be the big shot. She's like, nope, nope, I'm dying. I'm taking the spotlight. But I never really got my feet on the ground that first year. And then I thought my second year, okay, the second year is when I'm going to hit my stride. I thought I was on the upswing after my mom's death. And then one of my sisters died very suddenly. And then my dad died a few months after that. So here I am in the hardest job I've ever had, a job I had been working for so long. And then everybody was dying around me. Um, and that really opened the door to burnout. And after a couple of years, I wasn't happy at work anymore. I couldn't figure out where I was and what I was doing. I just kind of lost the ground beneath my feet. And I took some time off. It was in that time that I met my husband, and we made a plan to merge our lives. And so I took a year off, and this was going to be the year to get healthy, be well. And we got married. I moved up to Seattle, and then the pandemic hit, and everybody joined me on my self-imposed sabbatical. So here I was at the in burnout and trying to figure out how did I land here, and then the whole world around me seemed to be crumbling, and I started thinking, well, how do we all land here? Uh, when I started a consulting practice in late 2020, I started a weekly newsletter, and I used that newsletter as a space to process what was going on, to really pursue those questions of how did I get here and how did we all get here? And so each week I was posting a reflection, a short essay. And after a couple of years, I stepped back and saw a through line about identity. I kept coming back to the questions of, what did the world tell me to be? What did my family, what did my experiences tell me to be? How was I creating myself? And so I stepped back and saw that through line, and that's I think when the book was born. I didn't set out to write a book. I just set out to make sense of how I got to that place. And when I stepped back, I thought, well, maybe other people have had similar struggles, especially looking around in 2020, right?
Hmm.
Everything came to the surface, and how many of us had real tools to process through that? So that's where the book started. So it sounds like it was really heavy and really sad, and there is a lot of heavy and there is a lot of sad, but there's also a lot of joy because that exploration also. I was not interested in spinning my wheels and being sad. I wanted to carve out like what is the space that I want to take up in the world? Who do I want to be? And I'm going to use that space to figure that out and find my footing. So
Love
that's
it.
the book. That's the book. So the first two parts focus on formative experiences, formative relationships. The third part really focuses on well, each essay celebrates something that helped me shape my queer identity. And that's where I really dive into pop culture and movies, books, TV shows, celebrities who I would never meet, and yet somehow were visible to me, and I felt seen in, and I felt like I had language to understand myself, because of them. Madonna is one of them. You mentioned her. The
Hmm.
Golden Girls absolutely helped me, but designing women, but also authors like Edmund White and movies like Big Eden and Camp. Do you ever see Camp? Do you remember Camp? Early
Hmm
2000s about the musical
hmm
theater summer camp, and
Hmm.
there I'm 25 years old in the theater watching this, like this is what high school could have been like for me if I had gone to a camp like this. Um, but it also gave me an insight that the next generation did have the option to go to musical theater summer camp and be themselves fully in an environment that didn't expect them to be anything else. And that was very hope inspiring for me. So that third part, all about queer identity and celebrating that, it ultimately lands on a note of, where do we find hope? And for me, that's the fuel that helps me to keep moving forward.
Love it. So some of the essay topics that I saw as I was looking through it are birth order trauma, but pride parades, identity, which we've covered. Can I ask about the pop culture reference to the designing women? And I asked because my husband's on this kick. He's like, we should rewatch that. I want to see Julia Sugarbaker go off every episode.
I mean, the first few seasons of Designing Women are real magic. Before there was a whole cast shakeup, and
Hmm.
there's behind the scenes drama around Delta Burke and her tensions with the producers, and then Jean Smart left, and so there was a cast shakeup. But the first few seasons are really magic. Um, Designing women for me was exotic in like all the best ways, right? I was a suburban Catholic boy outside of Chicago, and here were these four glamorous women and all these shoulder pads and high hair, and in the South, it was the first time I think I remember seeing like a depiction of Southern culture that wasn't making fun of it, that
Right.
wasn't a joke, that they were fully formed, developed people, but they also could make fun of themselves. It was a tongue-in-cheek kind of show.
Hmm.
But I think, Linda Bloodworth Thomason, who created the show, and, we all look to Julia Sugarbaker, Dixie Carter's character as, the great hero. And her performance as Julia was amazing. And, she was everybody's hero, right? Even as a little kid, I remember thinking, God, I wish, I hope I have Dixie Carter in my corner. I hope I have Julia Sugarbaker in my corner. But really, the venom, the vitriol was all Linda Bloodworth Thomason. It was the writing of that show. It was her political point of view, her passion to lean into tough territory and make people who were drawn to their show confront some things about culture. And they deconstructed stereotypes about the South. They deconstructed stereotypes about women. They presented four working women working
Business
together.
owners.
The only man in sight was Anthony, and that's a whole complicated character. But it was four independent working women who had a successful business, and that alone was radical. And so that
Hmm.
that was pretty eye-opening for me. Like, oh, that's how the world could be? Cool. Ah, but then, once in a while, Julia would take on, social justice, a monologue, and it was life-saving for me. When I think about, there are episodes where she would really confront other characters who were introduced with racist tropes or with sexist tropes, they were also very clearly on the side of queer folks, and
Hmm.
they didn't appear a lot in Designing Women. But when they did, it was pretty powerful. One of the most powerful episodes, and I write about this in my essay on designing women, is an episode that leaned into AIDS, and they hired a client who was a young Tony Goldwyn, the actor Tony Goldwyn, as a baby actor, playing a young man who had been diagnosed with AIDS, and he knew he was dying, and he wanted the firm to design his funeral, but also
Hmm.
to redesigned the funeral home to make it a more beautiful space for other AIDS patients who otherwise, their families and friends were left to a drab, funeral home. He wanted to leave some joy behind. That and her takedown of Imogene, it took on it named all of the prejudices. It named,
Hmm.
the religious, the social, the uninformed prejudices that were swirling in the world. The Anita Bryant mindset and the, God is killing all the right people mindset. Um, Julia took on every point and shot it down. And there's if you've seen it, I assume you two have. There's a wonderful, she's leaning into Imogene, and if God was giving out sexually transmitted diseases as a punishment for sinning, then you would be in the free clinic all the time. And I can't watch that episode without weeping. I can't get through that monologue without weeping because I think, oh, I had Julia Sugar. I was a little, queer closeted kid at that point. I didn't know what life was going to be, but I knew I'd have her in the corner. And I
Right.
bet a lot of viewers also, I bet a lot of queer viewers saw that and they thought, okay, finally, someone is speaking up for us. Somebody
Right.
is shouting for us, and that's what gay men needed at the time, especially.
Absolutely. Well, still.
Yeah.
So I know I asked about one that I was interested in. Is there an essay you would like to share with listeners and fans?
Oh, would you like me to read one
Or just
or just
highlight one
talk
of your
about it?
one that you would like the world to know about.
Mm. There are a few that I keep coming back to because I enjoy reading. It's weird to say I like reading my own stuff, but it's once you publish something, it's not yours anymore. I can suddenly detach and I can see it from a new angle. So there
Hmm.
are a few that I keep coming back to for that. Paris is Burning is one. Paris is Burning, the documentary from 1990 about the ballroom scene in
Yeah.
Harlem, and it was at the time a really insightful and eye-opening thing. But for me as a little suburban white kid, like it really got me thinking way beyond the walls of the suburbs. It really opened my eyes to what life was like, outside of my little bubble. I can't tell you how important that was to me when I finally saw it when I was in college. Um, the Golden Girls is probably my favorite. The Golden Girls is, I mean, I save it for last, for a reason because it really was the one that I still watch it on a loop. I think I'm on my like 7,000th watch of the series, and every time it doesn't get old. It doesn't get dated. It doesn't, the costuming feels a little
Sure.
dated sometimes, but the topics are relevant. The way that they talk to each other is still pressing and innovative and urgent. It's incredibly powerful. Um, and then the other one that I've been thinking about a lot and I've been returning to is Berlin, about a club in Chicago that I first stumbled into. I must have been 19 or 20. Um, and it was named, kind of in honor of Christopher Isherwood's, stories about Berlin and the queer life in Berlin in the 20s and how
Hmm.
vibrant and it was a time of queer extravagance, and the club tried to tap into that. And the extravagance wasn't necessarily it wasn't a fancy club or anything, but the people who were there and the swirl on the dance floor and what was happening. I would dance with drag queens. I was dancing and making out with boys and girls and non-binary folks before we had language for that. It was a place where I got to see and meet everybody. And I think I'm more conscious of spaces like that, Berlin in particular. I got to know my body. I got to know what I liked. I got to know what I didn't like. I got to know why boundaries were important for myself and for others, in a club, on a dance floor. And
Hmm.
that's it's an educational space, shall we say.
Absolutely. Is there anything else about Six to Carry the Casket and One to Say the Mass that you want folks to know that we didn't think to ask?
Mm.
I have a question though.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
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 Uh, so how do you, as a queer person of faith, do you deal with the reconciliation to answer the question for those queers who have left faith altogether because of the dogma and the stigma that queerdom represents for it? I mean, I
Mm.
was reared as a Catholic boy as well, but I left the faith at around mid-teenage years because I realized none of this was going to be for me because I knew ultimately where I was in their pecking order of
Yeah.
being compassionate about. Now, the church has done quite a bit to try and rectify that, but I think it has burned a lot of bridges with the queer community that I don't see an easy path of repairing. It's a little too late in many respects. I mean, I am applauding them for some of their actions, but it's something that, okay, we're in 2025. You know
Yeah.
better. Why aren't you doing better? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So does your book address anything along those lines?
It does. I don't take on the questions that you put out from a polemical angle. I'm not trying to take down the church. I'm not trying to propose a new church structure, a new ecclesiology. But for me, I had a really positive experience of religion growing up. That doesn't mean everybody did, and I totally respect it when people say that they have left it, that they are because they were hurt by it, they were traumatized by it, they are continually hurt by it. They still have family members who are continuing to cite faith or religious practice or those rules as a reason to uh,
Yeah, it's the
or
weaponization of the
degrade
faith.
us. And that's,
Yes.
so I totally understand. I'm not out to convince anyone to come back to practice. And I don't practice anymore because I don't feel right showing up to church anymore. It doesn't feel good. Um, that doesn't mean that hasn't formed me though. So I had a really positive experience of religion growing up, and I tell some stories about that. A key piece of it, I think, was the religious culture in my family. Now, I'm the youngest of 10, Irish Catholic all the way, right? So it sounds like very devout Catholics, my parents, devout Catholics, my parents. And they were, but that doesn't mean that they were conservative. They were actually pretty progressive and very inclusive. Um, my mom frequently cited the primacy of conscience. This notion in Catholicism that, our conscience is that thing in us that is closest to God. And when our conscience says yes or no, that's what we need to listen to, even above local authorities, even above the church. Even if the Pope says, my mom used to say, oh, the Pope, he's just another priest. She did not have, she was not awed by the power structure of the church. For her, she saw we're all in this together. We church. And that really shaped my sense of, I'm not ready, I'm stubborn enough not to want to just hand it over and say, oh, I'm going to leave the church because I don't like that power structure. It's like, I don't think the power structure is legitimate. That is a growth. That is a very human outgrowth, right? To build up a structure like that. Of course, the patriarchy is going to come in and ruin it. But at the core and in our individual experiences, that is where I find the church. And when I was teaching religion, when I was a campus minister, that's what I wanted my students to come to see. The church wasn't this big power structure in Rome. The church was the group of us sitting in this room right here. And what are the experiences that we have? We have a history of revelation and thought and philosophy to help us make sense of it. But I also don't believe that this is the only right way to live in the world. I've spent a lot of my life studying religion and thinking about religion. Religion is one way to be really fully human, but it's not the only way. And everybody has different approaches, and depending on where you landed in the world when you entered it, you're exposed to different things, and different things are great and different things are horrible. But it's, we make our experiences, we build that up. And I take that seriously with religious practice, looking at my own and looking at others. There's not one way to do it. There's not one right way to do it. And so when people start to say like, oh, there's only one way to be Catholic and therefore, you can't be gay. It's like, well, actually, I've never felt the conflict because nobody ever early in my life told me that it was a conflict. And then when I started hearing the voices that said it was wrong, it was sinful, it was wrong, it was sinful, I could hear my mom saying, like, listen to your conscience. And I could hear my conscience saying, this is how you were created. So,
Okay. No, no, I just think
so
it's a fair.
that's
I,
where I land. And I know that not everybody Not everybody has that starting point. Not everybody has that perspective. I look back and I think back, I'm like, oh God, I was complicit. Like I was working in Catholic schools. I was working as a religion teacher, as a campus minister. I directed a service learning program. Uh, for a lot of my students, I was the face of the church. And I took that as an opportunity. I thought I was going to be able to move the needle. I thought I was going to be able to say, I was just going to be able to give my students language that I didn't have to understand their role, their ability to shape the church I thought I was going to move the needle. What arrogance, right? But but I went to a conference and I heard Dan Savage speak about the It Gets Better project. In 2012, he spoke at the National Association of Independent Schools conference in Seattle. My first trip to Seattle, I feel like it was foreshadowing. So my first trip to Seattle, I hear Dan Savage speak, and he's talking about the It Gets Better project and the videos they solicited to get to kids on YouTube and let them know it gets better. And it came out of a time when the suicides of queer teenagers was just it was on the rise, and what do we do? So Dan and Terry wanted to get the message to kids like it does get better. Just hold on until you we can get to you. And it was an incredible presentation. People were moved, you got a room full of teachers and everybody's excited about like what can we do to help kids. So somebody gets up to ask a question and they're reading a question from somebody else because that person couldn't even stand up in that environment to ask a question without risking getting fired. And everybody in the room is like, "Oh, can you imagine working someplace like that?" And those of us from the Catholic school are like, "Oh, do we know you? Oh, like that sounds familiar." Uh, and the question was, I'm queer, I'm in this school, and I'm always here because, I want queer kids to know that someone like them is here, that I'm watching out for them. So what advice would you give to someone like me? And he kind of took a minute and he cocked his head and he said, "You're not going to like my response." And he said, "You need to get your resume in order." And everybody kind of like was shocked by his response. And then he explained, "You think your presence there is making them feel safe, but what you're really telling them is that it's okay to leave part of yourself at the door on the way into work in the morning." And I could never unhear that, and I immediately like my self understanding as an educator was just rocked, was just turned upside down. And suddenly I recognized, like, oh, I am complicit in this institution. Like, I have not actually been making a safe place if I haven't had a safe place there. I could only do so much for these kids uh, if I myself couldn't be fully myself at work.
Hmm.
So for me, that was an earth-shattering moment. And but at the same, there's an essay in the book that I title "Dan Savage Ruined My Life," and I say very sincerely at the end, so Dan ruined my life, and thank you, like thank you for ruining everything because it set me on the path that led me to getting out of Catholic schools, that led me to more fully embracing and exploring who I am and not trying to keep accommodating or try to keep adapting to, it finally dawned on me like, oh, I should just take space. Like, oh, like I think there's a moment that, is there a queer revelation? At some point we're given a beautiful insight of like, oh, I can take space and I don't need to be restricted by this. Like I'm the only one who can restrict this. Like, okay, so take up as much space as I need. So that all comes from Dan.
Well, as I was poking around your site, I saw that you're also a ritual designer
Mm.
for queer individuals. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure, sure. Well, I'm a ritual designer for all sorts of people. Most of
Okay.
my work is in weddings, and most of the couples I work with are, they don't have a tradition to draw on, or they're doing something interfaith or intercultural, and they want to be thoughtful about it. And with queer couples, like I get very excited when queer couples reach out to me, kind of like, oh, I get to do a queer wedding. It's going to be very exciting. My approach isn't to just like create a beautiful, pretty moment. I try to bring couples into a process of reflecting, do these practices that I associate with a wedding or do the things that I see on Pinterest actually resonate with our values in our lives? So my goal is to create a ceremony, a moment that reflects the values, the experiences, the identities of the people at the center. And some couples want a traditional thing that resonates with them. Great. Others are more open to asking questions about where did the practice originate? You know, like, well, I'm not super comfortable about walking down the aisle. Like, why do we walk down the aisle? Well, we only walk down the aisle because Queen Victoria walked down the aisle. So if you don't want to imitate Queen Victoria, don't walk down the aisle. Like, well, why do we have like bridesmaids and groomsmen? Like, well, we're imitating the royal courts of Europe and the king and the queen who had their entourage in matching outfits to show their allegiance, and and they accompanied them everywhere they went. So if you want to be king and queen for a day, sure, have bridesmaids, have groomsmen. But if not, like it opens the opportunity to like create whatever the experience is. I think of a ritual, I think of it as a wedding in particular, as an opportunity to create your ideal space. How do you think people should interact in the world? How do you think people should dress, in the ideal moment? What are you going to eat? How are you going to celebrate? How are we going to come together? So that, starting with that, it opens up the opportunities. Now, for queer people in particular, I get excited because we get to ask all the heteronormative questions. Because, there's so much in weddings, and we're sentimentally attached to things. Uh, but they're very heteronormative. They're very much rooted in heterosexual identity. The only thing that is required at a wedding, and part of the problem is that part of the challenge is that people come into it thinking you have to do certain things. Well, you have
Hmm.
to enter down the aisle. Well, you have to exchange rings. Well, you have to blah 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 blah. No, the only thing that is required at a wedding is the public declaration of your commitment to each other and witnesses, and that varies by state, how many witnesses you need. Everything else is the experience you want to recreate. So, if you want the middle aisle and everybody facing forward and a nice tableau at the front, you are recreating a 19th century Protestant church. And if that's good for you, great. But if you're not interested in being a 19th century Protestant, don't recreate that. Like, do something different. So, why not tap into queer culture? Why not tap into queer identity? We don't have to keep imitating straight rituals, straight ceremonies. I think there's so much opportunity for creativity and richness there. And it doesn't mean we have to innovate for innovation's sake. It's more like what's authentic. Like when you think, it baffles me when queer couples have very heteronormative weddings. Um, I came to understand, somebody explained it to me once that like look at it from this perspective. Um, Here we've been excluded from these practices for so long that it's exciting to step into those roles. And finally, I get to walk down the aisle in a white dress. Finally, I get to have 10 groomsmen, in matching tuxedos. That does indicate some modicum of progress or inclusion, but it's still imitating and propping up old notions of marriage and what weddings are that are misogynist and heteronormative and all the other things that go with the patriarchy, right? A little bit of racist, a little bit of classist, all the isms, kind of pop up in those very formal moments.
Right.
So I think there's an opportunity, and I welcome the creativity with queer ceremonies. I think straight people can look to queer ceremonies too for like more creative, more authentic moments. It's not just about recreating what's been done. It's about declaring to the world who you are and the world you want to live in and the home you're going to build. That's the starting point.
Love it. Love it. All right. Are you ready for our get to know you questions?
I love get to know you questions. I'm a former campus minister, so like icebreakers and get to know you questions is that's my life and my love.
All
Take
right.
it away.
Well, Before we get to that, just remember that if you like what we're doing here, make sure you like, subscribe, do all the things. If you want to help us keep this going, please consider joining our Patreon at patreon.com/rope podcast. Also, you can also just throw us some couch change that you find in the cushions at buymeacoffee.com/rope podcast. So with all of that out of the way, let's get to the questions. Can you name a movie that was better than the book?
A movie that was better than the book. Ooh, The Hours.
Oh,
I
okay.
love the book, The Hours. I love anything Michael Cunningham writes. But something about the movie, Ed Harris, and Meryl Streep, were just overwhelmingly beautiful.
Okay. Well, which fictional character would you most like to be friends with?
Hmm. Blanche Devereaux.
Okay. All right. What is the most fascinating fact that you know?
The most fascinating fact that I know, I mean, define fascinating.
It's up to you. You define it.
The most fascinating fact that I know is that I am awake in the morning. Like the minute I
You get
open
a
my
whole nother
eyes,
day to screw things up.
it's like, oh my, I'm still here. Cool. Like that's fascinating for me. But I only know that. Like we only know our own realities, right?
Right, right. Absolutely. All right. What was your favorite subject in school?
Religion.
Okay.
I went to
Before,
Catholic school, so we actually had the opportunity to take religion classes. Yeah.
okay. All right. Before making a telephone call, do you rehearse what you're going to say?
Who makes telephone calls anymore? My least favorite, one of my least, no, my least favorite thing in the world is driving. My second least favorite thing in the world is talking on the phone. It's incredibly stressful for me. When the pandemic hit and we all of a sudden were seeing each other on screens and everybody was like, ah, Zoom fatigue, Zoom fatigue. Are you kidding? I am alone, but I can look everybody in the eyes and I can see everybody's face and like read their reactions. It's like a phone is terrifying because I don't know what you're doing on the other side. I can't see the nuances that are coming with your facial expressions.
Of
Yeah.
course, the other side of it is some people have gotten caught doing things on the camera that they forgot they were on the camera. So,
We
just
live
saying.
and we learn.
Right, 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 right. All right. See, what current event or causes are you most passionate about?
Mm. Uh, Queer pride, in particular, trans trans rights and trans kids, like the overwhelming assault on trans kids in the last decade is it just keeps getting worse. And I don't, it's we've been shouting for queer rights for over 50 years, in at least in the modern iteration of the gay rights movement since Stonewall. It took too long for the LGBs to welcome the Ts and understand what that means for people, that identity means for people. And I think we were woefully underprepared to support trans people through this. And now, of course, the Democratic Party was debating, oh, did we pay too much attention to trans people? Like, oh, no, we didn't pay enough.
Yeah, we
And
didn't. Yeah, I mean, that
that's
was the whole conversation was ridiculous. It was the Republicans that were talking about it, and Kamala never even said anything about it in any of her, so it's just the bullshit that flies
yeah,
about it. Yeah,
yeah,
no,
yeah.
totally there with you. All right, if you could visit anywhere in the world, where would that be?
Mm, India.
Hmm.
India. I'd love to spend I've been talking about this since I was in grad school. I did a lot of work on Hinduism and South Asian religion when I was in divinity school, and there's a place in India. It's a temple complex in a place called Khajuraho, and Khajuraho is famous because many of the temples in the complex are quite the art covering the temples is erotic, and it's kind of a fascinating point of study. Here's this moment where this temple complex was covered in all these erotic and sexual, very explicitly sexual images. Um, And it creates a problem for a lot of people who assume that religion is, oh, anti-sex. And it's like, well, actually, if you look at Khajuraho. But I've always wanted to visit Khajuraho and like spend a month just, contemplating the structures and understanding it. But there's so much more to India. Yeah, there's so much more to India that I'd love to explore and learn. It's the most ancient, constantly inhabited cities in the world, places like, Varanasi, and I would love to just, step into that history and think about like what is the future going to be like. I feel like India's gotten a head start in some ways, so I think there's a lot to learn about the world there.
Okay. Who, if anyone, was your first celebrity crush?
If I say Angela Lansbury, let me be clear. I was like maybe 6 or 7 years old. So, crush, I don't know about that. I don't know. But Angela Lansbury was my first celebrity obsession, shall we say?
Okay. All right.
All right.
Well, I was a child. It was Christopher Plummer and Sound of Music. So,
Ah, Georg
he was just stunningly beautiful in that movie.
really was. He really was. Oh,
I'm like, if she won't take the job, I will.
Maria runs back to the Abbey
Yeah,
and
right.
oh,
Go back,
job
girl.
opening?
Yeah. Hello. All right. Final question. What was your personal favorite recipe that you make, and are you willing to share it with us?
I make my mom's soda bread, but I do it vegan. So my mom makes soda bread. I don't know how many generations it goes back. I don't pretend it's like a 700-year-old recipe or anything. It's probably like her grandmother. Uh, but it's very simple, but I've updated it. Really the only difference is the buttermilk. So you can make your own vegan buttermilk. I use coconut milk with a little bit of lemon juice, let it curdle, become buttermilky. Yeah, I'll send you the recipe. It's great. But it's a very easy thing to make and it's an easy thing to adapt. And I find myself making a lot of soda bread when I need to think, something. I love baking. I love cooking. I perfected the pie crust last year and I haven't, like, I can't stop. But I'm really good at vegan buttercream for like the cakes and stuff. But for me, it always comes back to the soda bread. I just made a batch. We had some friends staying over the weekend, so I made a couple of loaves of soda bread that were orange and chocolate chip. Oh, that's one of the best combinations. It's great. So it's
Excellent.
simple. It gives me some easy to make. I can do it kind of, with my eyes closed and while I'm thinking about something, and it helps me process whatever idea it is I'm chewing on. And but yeah, I love the soda bread.
I totally get it. For me, it's sourdough. A wild sourdough is like some of the best, and that and just butter. I'm fine. I'm good.
What else do you need?
Yeah, right. It's just the basics. Yeah, I'm good. You know. Oh, well, you made it through the list. Bravo.
Thank you.
Hmm. So you're on the promotion tour for Six to Carry the Casket and Want to Say the Mass, right?
I am.
Do you have any upcoming dates or interviews or anything you want to put in people's ears?
Yeah, actually the book is officially launching on July 8th,
Hmm.
and I let me show my shirt. Charlie's Queer Books
Ooh.
is hosting the launch party in Seattle. So if you're in Seattle on July 8th, go to Charlie's Queer Books website, and you can find all the event details there for the book launch. I'm also going to be in Chicago, in my hometown, actually, at the bookstall in Winnetka, which was my mom's favorite bookstore. It's where she bought all our books. So it's kind of wild to be going back, and I'm going to be in conversation with Alice Moody on July 29th. Um, so if you're in the Chicago area, go to the bookstall's website, and they've got all the event info there. Other than that, I'm having a lot of really great conversations with people about the book and about writing and about, what's happening in the world, and so I'm keeping my website billhulseman.com and my socials, Bill Hulseman Rituals, on Instagram or on Facebook. I'm keeping those up to date too with upcoming events as I know about them.
Perfect. You just ran around my next question, which was awesome. So, in closing, do you have any final words of wisdom for folks?
I don't know if I can call myself wise enough to offer wisdom. I will say I'd like to share a blessing from Marcia Falk. Marcia Falk is a Reformed Jewish poet and theologian, a philosopher, and she did a translation of the Song of Songs that I love. And actually, we used one of the poems from the Song of Songs at our wedding, and the language of it is in our vows. I actually have the first line of it in Hebrew on my forearm. So my husband has it in English. He doesn't read Hebrew, but I do. So he's got it on it. So we've literally the language says, write my name into your arm, into your skin. So we did. Anyway, Marcia Falk is this wonderful poet. She created the Book of Blessings, which is a book of prayers and blessings for Reconstruction Jewish liturgies. And the blessing for children is something that I have always really clung to, and I like to offer to other folks. It's like, what do we wish for people? What do we hope for people? And for me, it always comes back to her words, and it's be who you are, and may you be blessed in all that you are. And that's it. So if there's anything I've learned from my book, it's gratitude and hoping, because I've been given the space to be myself, and I have the privilege to be myself, and I hope that for everybody.
Beautiful. Well said. We'd like to extend a huge thank you to Bill Hulseman for joining us today. Thank you, Bill, so much. And thank you for putting your works out into the world.
Thanks for having me. What a joy.
Our pleasure. All right, we at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators. If you enjoy learning about new artists or hearing our thoughts on entertainment media, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes. The show was produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.rotepodcast.com. Tune in next week for your queer media fix.
Bye-bye now.
Oh, what's that? Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.